The Edmonton Oilers defeated the LA Kings 6-1 Friday night out in California. And to quote the great Randy Newman, man, I love LA.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special weekend edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your interim host, Nick Soraris, and man, satisfying victory after everything that went down in game number 2 in Edmonton, where the Oilers themselves would tell you they didn't feel great about how they played. They came out Friday night and they kicked some butt. So on today's show, we are going to touch on the game itself, some of the big picture things. That's where we're going to start. You know me, I love the conceptual, how the series is developing, the back and forth, the emotional tolls. Second segment, we're going to touch on some of the mechanics of the game, what worked for the Oilers, something I tweeted about and then ultimately got proven wrong with over the course of the game. And then we're going to wrap up. We're going to highlight some individual performances worthy of commendation. So, starting out, the game itself. It took on a weird energy once Englund threw that hit on Evander Kane. I know the Oilers got out to the big lead. They're up 3-0 after one period. And you kind of feel like you're at where you were at after game 1. The Oilers got out to a nice lead. I know that game was a little bit more back and forth. Game number 1, Stuart Skinner wasn't as good in game 1 as he was tonight. The Kings had a little bit more oomph to their game on offense. The Kings took a lot of penalties tonight, and that's really what allowed this game to get out of hand on their behalf. But from the purpose for talking about the series at large, what the path looks like, you've heard me mention more than once that if the Kings are going to make this a series, they're going to have to find ways to prolong this series. That there was no planet in which the Kings were going to win this series in 4 or 5 games. The talent, the way it is on these two teams, it was not happening. There was no path to that happening. So how are the Kings going to win 2 or 3 or 4 games in this series? They got their one overtime win. That might be all they get as far as overtime help. They might be able to get a Cam Talbot game in here. That's not out of the realm of possibility. But if you want a Cam Talbot game, you can't take this many penalties. You can't be giving out double minors. You can't be giving out majors. You can't let McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Bouchard, Nugent-Hopkins eat you alive like this. If you want your goalie to have a chance in this game, you're going to need your goalie to have a chance. And when you are facing a power play that is this good, the Oilers scored 3 power play goals tonight. When you are facing a power play that is this good at hockey, this good at putting the puck in your net, your goalie doesn't have a chance. You could put Connor Hellebuyck at bad example. Connor Hellebuyck had a rough game in Colorado. Speaking of, do hope Brendan Dillon's okay. That was a really nasty cut on his hand. He had to leave the game, blood everywhere. You never want to see stuff like that happen in the game. That game and this game, the referees have to do a better job of de-escalating, and it's going to happen. These are playoff series. The Kings and Oilers, they have a history. They've played each other in the first round a couple times. There is real animosity amongst these groups. You heard a lot of guys on the Kings talk about how satisfying it was to go into Edmonton the other night and win a game on the road with a really convincing road effort. That there's real animosity here. These teams are not fond of each other. The hit Englund throws on Kane, you can't do it. You can't do it. And this is the first real inflection point in my week and a half of hosting Locked On Oilers, where we're going to get into something that's one of the third rails of hockey discourse on the internet. I am not anti-hitting. I am not anti-fighting. I think for the most part, a lot of players and coaches and people around the game use those topics as crutches to cling on to things about how they feel about hockey. That based on their lived experiences, those things matter because that's the way it was when they played. I think there's a time where sometimes if fighting is allowed, and the NHL has shown no indication that they're going to ban fighting, I think there are situations that require a fight. I do think there are situations where players are going to react differently to the referees. And one of the examples of that is one of the more recent developments in the NHL is fights after hits that aren't penalized. Fighting is supposed to be there as a deterrent and as a policing system. If you don't want to fight, you don't throw the dirty hit, or you don't play on that line. But now, being that most players operate within a reasonable understanding of what we define as a predatory or dangerous hit, a lot of guys don't get penalized for a dangerous hit. They don't get penalized for a hit to the head or a late hit or a high hit. And instead, you're left with the big open ice hit that happens once every other week. In this case, it happened to Evander Kane, where Englund just blew him up. Kane wasn't really looking. He was leaning slightly, and Englund just absolutely cleans him through the ice. The issue I have with that hit is not that it's a penalty, not that it's suspendable, though it was a penalty and it may end up being a suspendable hit. It's that it shows a fundamental lack of respect for the game, your teammates, and your opponents. You throw that hit in that game, you have put a target on every single one of your teammates' backs. It has put a target on your own back. It has crossed the line from this is me trying to make a hockey play to this is me trying to hurt someone. And you can say, well, being hurt, getting hurt is an inherent risk of playing a contact sport like hockey. You have to be willing to accept that if you're going to step on the ice, you could get hurt. That's true. But we don't need to put players in a situation like this where there is an increased risk, an inordinate risk of injury, where knowing what we know about hits to the head, knee-on-knee contact, the types of hits that are particularly dangerous, that have a track record of producing injury or long-term problems for players. Knowing what we know about those, we should be doing everything in our power to coach those out of our players. And then if a player does do something stupid like that, the referees are on it and player safety is on it. But because player safety is largely performative, it is largely there for show, and it is largely there to placate the public as opposed to actually protecting the players, we operate in this Wild West environment where if a player doesn't get penalized, maybe there's a fight, or the next time the teams play, there's a fight. Maybe there's a fine. And unless you're Tom Wilson, you probably aren't getting suspended, or maybe Matt Rempe, who got suspended earlier this year for the one hit he threw on Jonas Siegenthaler. Matt Rempe might get suspended for a hit he threw in the game on Friday night as well. But circling back to the conversation at hand about this game and this series, you feel the Kings can't keep up. You feel the Kings' frustration is starting to percolate. You see they cannot stop the Oilers' power play. There's nothing they can do. There is nothing they can do. The Oilers are scoring close to at will. I know that feels a little disingenuous to say, considering they lost a game in overtime, but the Oilers have scored 17 goals in 3 games. That's a lot of goals. That's more than 5 goals a game on average, 5 point whatever decimals. If you are scoring 5 goals a game, including a game that went to overtime and you lost, even though you played pretty well, all things considered, and I know I graded them as a B- C+ effort in their game they lost on Wednesday night, but if you are scoring 4 goals in a game that you didn't play particularly well in against a good defensive team, you have a good offense. I don't think it's a coincidence that in the 2 wins, the Oilers have a combined 13 goals. When they're going, it is like spinning your tires in the mud. But coming up next, we're going to hone in on a few subjects from within game 2. Hone in on a few topics from within game number 3. Coming up next on Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every single day. We are in the thick of it. This is the best time of year to be a sports fan. We've got the basketball and hockey playoffs running concurrently. You got Kevin Durant and LeBron both down 3-0 in the first round. You've got the Winnipeg Jets on the ropes against the Colorado Avalanche. You've got the Bruins and Leafs dueling it out again We've got motorsports back. We've got both Formula One and NASCAR going on. The NFL draft rounds 4 through 7 going on today when you're listening to this episode, rounds 4 through 7 on Saturday. You've got baseball in full swing, and you have got to get in on the action with our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and by our friends at Gametime. The ticket buying process can be really frustrating. It's hard to get a fair deal. It's hard to know what you're buying. It is hard to get a fulfilling and satisfying experience. We are at a point where I'm going to an event pretty much every week, whether it's baseball. I'll be at the Met game this week on Sunday. I more likely than not will be at Rangers game 1 and 2 of the second round when the Rangers qualify for that. And the only place I am buying tickets through is the Gametime app. The best feature, and my personal favorite as somebody who goes to a lot of events in Madison Square Garden, is the digital view of what the view of the ice looks like from your seat. So you know if you're sitting in the upper bowl at Madison Square Garden and the Chase Bridge is in your way, you know what the view looks like. Can you see behind both goal lines? Can you see the scoreboard? I need Gametime if I am going to be buying Rangers tickets. In addition, zone deals, flash deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats. Flash deals are in-app deals on select seats ahead of a game or an event, and the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit 110% of the difference. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you, everyone who is listening to today's edition of Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. I am really getting into the rhythm of being up this late on the East Coast. The game ended about 1:15, 1:20 Eastern Standard Time. It's a little bit before 2 a.m. as I'm recording this episode, and wouldn't have it any other way. Playoff hockey is the most exhilarating. It is the most exhilarating sporting experience to watch on just TV. Sure, there are individual moments in other sports that feel like this. If you're a football fan, you remember the Chiefs and the Bills in the divisional round in 2021. That was insane. We all remember that. If you're a motorsport fan, that last lap of the Daytona 500, or what qualifying is like the weekend of Monaco, that type of adrenaline-loaded feeling. But hockey's like that all the time. And the thing about this game that really struck me from an Oilers perspective is how hard they came out of the gate. And as the road team, you need to do what you can to settle in and dictate the game on your terms. You've heard me talk about that a lot in regards to the Kings in games 1 and 2. Game 1, the Kings did a really bad job of easing into that game. In game number 2, the Kings played with a little bit more abandon. They forechecked more aggressively. They were more deliberate in trying to speed up the Oilers' process. And in this game, the Oilers took it to the Kings. They forced the Kings to play more defense. They forced the Kings to play a style of game that does not suit them. The Kings, as I've mentioned a lot on this show in the week and a half I've been doing it, the Kings are a talented team. Kevin Fiala, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Alex Laferriere, Kopitar, Deneau, Quentin Byfield, Kempe, they have a really solid forward group. There's not a lot of weaknesses there. It's just that the Oilers guys have played better. That's really been the difference so far. And when you go and look under the hood, and when I talk about under the hood stats, we're talking about things like expected goals, scoring chances, high danger chances. those types of numbers are not going to be a great reflection of this game because the Oilers got out to a big lead. You're up 3-1, you're up 4-1. Your style of play is going to fundamentally change. The Oilers, I'm not going to say they took their foot off the gas, but they were not as aggressively pursuing offensive chances, especially at 5-on-5. Third period, a little bit different once you get to the penalties and the power plays, and, they scored 2 in the 2 power play goals in the third period. It's a little bit different once you get there. But when we're talking about the early stages of this game, where it's 3-1 in the second period, and I tweeted during the game that the Draisaitl Nugent-Hopkins line has had a hard time in this series, especially defensively. They have not done a great job. They've been on the ice for 5 goals against at even strength, and you would like that to be close to, if not over even. But being that Draisaitl is so effective on the power play, and being that the Oilers at large are so effective on the power play, being sub 50% in a lot of these metrics is not going to kill them at 5-on-5. If you're scoring on the power play at a 35-40% clip, that'll make up for a lot of woes. But you go look under the hood. The Oilers did not win the scoring chances battle in any period of this game. But the telltale number, and the way the Oilers are the Oilers, the high danger and the expected goals. When we talk about the quality of chances the Oilers are creating, they are getting the puck to quality areas. You saw the game Zach Hyman had again. I know Zach Hyman's goals come on the man advantage, but Zach Hyman's second goal came on the power play. The first one did not. I'm at a loss for words to describe the emergence Zach Hyman is having at this point in his career. It is really interesting when a guy changes environments. And if you see me typing on YouTube, I'm just Googling how old he is because I forget off the top of my head because it feels like he's been around a while. But yeah, he's 31 years old. And to break out like this at this age, a few players come to mind. Chris Kreider of the Rangers, Brock Nelson of the Islanders, guys who got into their early 30s, late 20s, and changed a little bit. Chris Kreider, the net deflections, the 54-goal season he had for the Rangers a couple years ago, he got a little bit more luck on the power play. And Zach Hyman is great on the power play, don't get me wrong, but he plays with an energy and I don't want to call it a recklessness, a fearlessness to his game where he's not the biggest guy. 6'1" he does not look big in relation to the guys he is jockeying for position with. You look at the teams in the NHL, the quality teams, you look at a team like the Vegas Golden Knights, all their defensemen are big boys, man. It is hard to get to that net front area. You are going to eat some sticks to the lumbar part of your spine. You are going to be constantly jockeying for position. It is a real challenge. But Zach Hyman has found a way. The Oilers at large have found a way to make the Kings uncomfortable in and around their net front. And coming up next, we're going to highlight some of the key performances in this game. Coming up next on Locked On Oilers. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Penalty, delay of game. You already talked about that, but there is so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels exciting and new every day with constant changing tournaments and challenges, a ton including their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win, or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. Get off the bench. Go download it now. It is free on Google Play or the Apple App Store. Game on. Thank you to everyone who has made it to the third segment of Locked On Oilers, where you've got your team covered every single day. And I'm going to start out with something that's going to sound weird in talking about the high performances to highlight. You go look at the box scores. There's a couple gaudy numbers, Draisaitl 3 points, Nuge 3, McDavid 3, Hyman 2, Evander Kane 2. Those are all great counting stats anytime you're recording a point in a game as somebody that's mortal like an Evander Kane or Nugent-Hopkins. You feel good about that. You contributed, you helped, especially Nuge. I thought Nuge has had a kind of a rough series so far. He's been a little bit uncomfortable. He's been on the ice for a couple goals again. So it's good to see him get on the stat sheet with 3 assists, go down. Even though, plus minus is not a good stat, to go down as a +1 after some of the games Nuge has had earlier in the series, it's a good feeling. But I want to highlight McDavid's performance on the power play. And I know McDavid, I've only been doing this show for a week and a half, and I feel like I've spent close to a third of the time of the episodes I've recorded over said week and a half talking about how good Connor McDavid is at hockey, because frankly, it's not fair. The wrinkles the Oilers are able to incorporate to their power play structure, no other team in the league can do this. And there are guys who are great skaters on other teams. Jack Hughes of the Devils, Matt Barzal of the Islanders, Kirill Kaprizov of the Minnesota Wild. There are players who skate reasonably well enough where if their team wanted them to, they could orchestrate their power play offense through them with basketball-style spacing the way the Oilers do. That's what I think is most striking to me about the way the Oilers operate their power play, is that it's very reminiscent of the way offenses move in basketball, where one player, the primary ball handler, and I know this is a little bit different now, especially in today's NBA where there's so much catch and shoot and there's so much transition offense. But back in my day, you used to have a ball dominant guy on the court who would dribble and bob and weave through traffic. And then the cut and slash, that's effectively what Connor McDavid does here, except instead of hitting someone in the corner that's wide open for a 3 because said player drove to the basket, drew the defender who was on the guy in the corner to the basket to try and double team to create an advantageous defensive play, he passes it 5 feet to his left and it's a wide open net. It is awe-inspiring to watch how Connor McDavid creates space for everybody else on the ice using his skating ability and his positioning. The reason the Oilers' power play is so dynamic and so hard to defend, and why guys get such easy looks, is because the spacing is so unique and because their spacing is dynamic. It's not the same look every time. We're not talking about the Capitals in Prime Ovechkin, where he's just going to sit at the top of the circle and wait for the 1T. Same thing with Stamkos. They're not going to sit there at the top of the circle and wait. It's not like the Stars where Joe Pavelski parks himself out in front. Same thing with it's not like the Rangers with Chris Kreider out in front. Connor McDavid can get the puck to anywhere on the ice as a pass or skating it there. When he bobs and weaves through traffic and he brings 3 or 4 defenders to him, the one goal the Oilers scored in game number 1 where McDavid recovered the puck behind the Kings net. He looked up, realized he had 10 to 15 feet of space where there was nobody with him, skated forward in front of the net with his back to the goalie, drew 3 defenders to him, and then simply made a 10-foot pass to his left to a wide open player. I believe it was a Zach Hyman goal in his hat trick, but I could be wrong about that. But you get what I'm saying. The Oilers' power play is so unbelievably dynamic, and the Kings' inability to keep their composure in a difficult situation is why the score got as out of hand as it did. The Oilers are not beating a team 6-1 in the playoffs without the other team doing something to mess up their game. I think the Kings are better than they've played so far in this series, but the Oilers are playing pretty well. The power play opportunities, if they continue to accumulate, this series lifespan will continue to grow shorter and shorter and shorter. You give teams like the Oilers power plays, they're going to figure it out. Even if they don't score on every power play, which they won't, no power play goes 100%. If they score 45% of the power play opportunities they get, in a 7-game series. The Oilers can do that. No one's going to do that in a regular season. You're not going 45% over 82 games. The Oilers can realistically go 40-45% in a 6-game or a 5-game series. If this series goes 5 or 6 games, the Oilers actually could have a 45-50% power play. But 3 stars of the game to highlight. You heard me talk about McDavid for that long. I will talk about McDavid more. Number 2, I want to highlight Zach Hyman, his 2 goals again. Really good energy player. And I know I'm on record as not being a big momentum and vibes guy in trying to ascertain the true value of a player, the quality of a team. But Zach Hyman plays with so much energy and so much passion and so much fire that he scores that first goal and everybody else is looking around like, all right, Zach's in the game. I got to do my part and help Zach. It is infectious when you have guys like this that play this style of hockey and they see how hard he has to work to get to these positions so that McDavid can hit him for a pass. You still have to be in the right spot and get to the right spot to put the puck in the net. And then my other star of the game, I do want to point out Draisaitl having a nice night. I struggle to place him in the hierarchy of players league-wide. I have long felt he is one of the best playmakers in the sport, and as the last 3 playoffs have proven, he's one of the best playoff goal scorers. He's got the most playoff goals of anybody in the league over the last 2 postseasons this year so far, and last year he passed Jonathan Marchessault, who had 1 more than him going into the games tonight. Draisaitl had 2. He passed him. Draisaitl's played 9 fewer games than Jonathan Marchessault in that same span, and he's got 1 more goal. Draisaitl is one of the best big game players we have in today's NHL. It was a really good performance from him. I'm glad his line did not get nearly as caved in at 5-on-5 as they have in other games. I'm glad they had a positive goal differential in this game, which they haven't had in some of the other games. When you've got Draisaitl and McDavid going, you are in a position to make something special happen. They get somebody like Zach Hyman going. They get Bouchard going. And Bouchard, I should mention, we're about to wrap up for the show, but being that we don't know the prognosis, don't want to speculate, you're going to assume the concussion spotter pulled him from the game or he didn't feel right after the hit from Pierre-Luc Dubois. The game kind of got ugly there at the end. At 5-1, the game got a little out of hand. The referees did not do a great job of bringing the temperature down. But yeah, the Dubois hit's not egregious, but you can see what Dubois is trying to do in throwing that hit. It's a little on the late side, but because it's a relatively clean hit, because you're just going to hope for the best, you're going to hope Bouchard's good to go. If Bouchard's not good to go for Sunday, then we're having a different conversation about this series and the Oilers' trajectory, because Bouchard, I've identified, is their most important player other than McDavid and Draisaitl. If Bouchard is hurt and seriously hurt, the Oilers are going to seriously need to recalibrate every aspect of their team and their expectations for the remainder of these playoffs. But fingers crossed Zach Hyman is okay. That'll do it for today's special weekend edition of Locked On Oilers. Make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Oilers wherever you get your podcasts. If you are on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave the show 5-star review. If you are watching over on YouTube, you are seeing the bags on my eyes progress. They started out up here. That we're almost at the start of my upper cheek. But hey, if I have it my way, they're going to be down to here, maybe even here if the Oilers go all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Hoping that happens. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell to get a new notification whenever a new episode goes live, especially on the weekend when we do an episode that we wouldn't usually do. Leave a comment. Who are your 3 stars of game number 3? I will talk to you guys Monday morning after game 4.